Hi everyone, and welcome to Ultrax One-on-One Talks. My name is Marko Matushinsky, and one more we have an amazing guest with us, Andreas Schlumberger. Andreas, hi, and welcome to this episode.
Hi, Marco. Thank you very much for the introduction. And looking forward to our talk.
Thank you for being here and your time with us. And I know that this episode will be amazing because, well, when I checked your experience and the last time we talked, you have a bunch of it and you change a lot of clubs, roles, positions. But I will leave this part to you. And if you can explain your background a little bit, where you start, what you'll be doing right now. So tell us more about your background.
Yes, thank you very much. So my background is initially being a sports scientist who was educated at the University of Frankfurt in Germany. And my first years of my career were the more scientific part, where I very, very early started to do performance diagnostics with high-performance athletes out of all sports, individual team sports, and so on. At the very beginning, not mainly football, to be honest. And I changed then slightly my focus while being still scientific. I changed to a, let's say, well-known rehabilitation clinic. Worked there for more than 10 years with high-performance athletes out of all sports, mainly football, but out of all sports. And during that time, I already get connected to professional football in terms of part-time jobs and opportunities. So I started with the first league club in 2005 initially, being responsible for speed training at the beginning only, which changed then step by step. I moved then on to the German Football Association and were responsible for the junior national teams and tried to build up all the strength and conditioning stuff, starting with that each team needed a strength and conditioning coach. So this was the main step for the junior national teams in Germany. And so next step was then the final decision to go fully into the club setting. This was 2011 when I went to Borussia Dortmund, where I had a combination of being responsible practically for rehab work, but being also responsible for as a head of strength and conditioning or fitness for the fitness coaches. So after 4 years, I moved then on being head of rehabilitation at Bayern Munich for 2 years. And due to private reasons, I stopped working there and had then the interesting opportunity to become the head of medicine and prevention at Borussia Mönchengladbach, another first league club in Germany, and which was a great experience. And then 1 year in a similar position at Schalke in Germany, before I moved to England, being there for 3.5 years with Liverpool Football Club until summer of 24. So at the moment, after stopping that, I'm not fully employed in football. So I'm actually professor for training science and biomechanics in team sports at a private university in Berlin in Germany. And in addition to that, I work as a rehabilitation and high performance consultant.
Like quite an experience, from your beginnings. You were working on a part-time, then you changed to the clubs, then you changed different roles. Now you're lecturing. So it's more private question, but what do you like the most, from those kind of things? I know that lecturing have quite, benefits and you feel like fulfilled, but also working in team environment is something that, especially, on a level like Liverpool, Bayern, Schalke, I don't want to miss some of the clubs because these are all great clubs, but both of those kind of things and educating, but also working on a pitch have benefits. But from your perspective, how was it when you changed those roles and do you like teaching, but also, do you miss field?
I think everything I did was at the right time. So it was always some type of progress. So there was no plan behind that. It was more or less random, I would say. But so it's difficult to say what I prefer. I would say I love all. So the two main things, I like to give experience to younger people. So that's what I do when educating or when teaching. And the other thing is I like to be part of a backroom staff, solving challenges with others together, but as a backroom staff member, do it in a quiet atmosphere in the backroom and not in the public.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
That's what I like to do, because I think we are guys, we are strength and conditioning specialists, rehab specialists. We don't work so that everybody observes what we are doing, so they might see the results. So and this kind of organization of our work I really like.
Yes, you can help, in both ways. You help here, but you also can help on a pitch and by by helping players on a daily basis from the side, like you said. And you mentioned one role I really like it, but well, both roles I'm really interested in. And can you tell us more about those positions? Like you mentioned that you were responsible for the whole system, like building the methodology or everything, like head of performance. We use that kind of a title for that position, but also on the other side, you were a rehab specialist in those clubs. So can you explain the first role a little bit more and the second one, how you saw those two worlds?
I mean, if I go back to my first full-time employment in football, then it was a combination of all, with a big emphasis on the practical rehab work, but also organizing the whole strength and conditioning fitness content together with my colleagues. And so I really like that on the one hand, because I feel that with rehab work, you have a big impact on players. So obviously, I would prefer that there's no injuries, but it's not too realistic. So if it happened, then at least we can have a big impact on them and use the time as good as possible. I'm not talking about come back stronger. I'm talking simply about doing the right things and helping each other to make the best out of it. But at the same time, because if you work in rehab, you are responsible for reintegration. Each player who will be reintegrated needs to go through warm-up processes and so on. So, I mean, only from that perspective, it's clear that the whole system has to be organized as good as possible, or perfect at best. And so together with the colleagues, organizing all regarding load management, regarding training planning. I mean, if you go back to the earlier years, it was the start of data analysis, which was not so common. And in that earlier years, it was also not that coaches said, "Oh, you're welcome with data. We don't want data. We don't need that." I mean, this were the early times. But to be honest, I like how it is today, but I like these times because in that times, what we did was much more talking about the proper planning of
methodology
training
and planning,
and not waiting for, okay, let's train, let's do what coaches want, and let's see how the data are, and then we might react in some way. So, I mean, this reactive way of working is, I think, the second part of the strategy, but never the first. But sometimes in modern days, it's a little bit more, this is the more important part.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, especially with a bunch of data that is coming right now when talking about it. But we sometimes moved from the methodology part, exercises, periodization models, and everything. We talk mostly about, like you said, what was the response according to that. But I think that this will gonna shift. It will come back, to methodology and talking more about trainings. And this is something that we should definitely do. And you mentioned that it's the most important thing on those two roles is that you have the structure, you have the organization, and with this I can connect communication. And how do you, on those positions that you were, how do you ensure that clear communication goes between the athletes and staff members? And what do you think how important communication is on those levels?
Yes, obviously communication is one of the most important aspects of clear working strategy. And in the big performance stuffs in modern days, it's all about communication. It's all about organizing communication. Who is telling whom what, when. It's all about that. And, but this is always very well-planned communication is always happens at the same time to have clear role responsibilities and understanding of roles, because this is one of the big limitations in my opinion. So meaning if you don't have clear roles, you have chaos in communication normally. And it was easier in earlier times. So when I go back to working at Borussia Dortmund and Bayern Munich, even when the teams were also great there. It was more time, so I'm talking about 10, 15 years ago, when everybody was clear about, okay, we're working in a team, but everybody has its role, its specialist, and has to decide on his own. And so, I mean, the communication was then clear. You have a head of performance or a rehab guy, or you have a medical doctor, and those guys communicate with the head coach or with the assistant coaches. And I mean, this was really easy. This was not times where you start the morning with big meetings. And as we all know, nowadays it's important because stuffs are that big that everybody has the same level of information. But this needs a lot of energy. And so it doesn't solve all problems, let's say. I mean, I think different ways are possible. Simply, yeah. I mean, everybody would agree that if you stop your working day, if you finish off and you had 2.5 to 3 hours of meeting, and it's more meeting than practical work with players, then this is time consuming with energy sometimes. And at least you should look for balance, and also not for doing meetings for the sake of meetings, but really use it for learning, also for making mistakes finally at the end. So we nowadays I feel that everybody is under ways like, okay, if we plan everything all right, everything will be perfect. No surprises.
Not
happen.
Exactly.
They will happen.
Yeah. And you said two amazing things for me here is that organizing communication. I don't know how many people are thinking about how to organize the channels of communication. Everybody knows that communication is important, like you said, but how to organize it in a daily work sometimes is missing. What kind of meetings, when we should do meeting, what are the topics inside of the meetings. I'm now talking from, let's say, my experience, but also in the leagues that I worked here on the Balkan countries, and one of the problems was the organization of communication. Some meetings were missing, the structure of the meetings were not so structured, and the second thing was defining the roles. In my experience, I was in I think only one club or something like this, maybe two. I get like a explanation, hey, this is your responsibility, you should do this and that. But in the other situations, it was like, okay, you're here and no one didn't tell you, we expect this, you do this, you just needed to manage, what are the responsibilities to do it. But to get back to the questions, and let's say now you mentioned the organization of communication. So how would you structure the solid communication channel, or maybe to rephrase the question, or how does one day of your work looked like when you were in clubs, when you were with the first team? So you're arriving to the club at, I don't know, that time, then you had some meeting or something like this.
Yeah, first of all, I would add another aspect when organizing communication. It's all about decision making. So if I try to organize communication, it's to orientate it towards the best decision making process we could have. So what does it not mean? It does not mean that we need to have too long big meetings where everyone has to be involved if the single guy has no impact on the decision because he's not informed. So I'll give you a simple example. We are talking about in a big meeting about a player who probably had some tightness in muscles from the day before, and you have a big meeting with 20 people, and 3 of them know all facts about them and the other 17 not. Why should everybody discuss about that fact? Doesn't make too much sense. So what I prefer is to have regular big meetings during a day. It could be at the beginning, but it could be also at the end. I know both solutions. So, I mean, the end of the day is always, let's say, the best time because training is done. And for that given day, it's the point of time where everybody has the most information compared to the morning when if nothing changed from the day before, then everything is all right. But it didn't change normally. And the things which changed are not known at this moment. So if doing bigger meetings, I like to do them after training compared to before training. And I would always prefer to have conversation about decision making for that given day in smaller groups, exactly in those groups who are responsible for several things like The strength and conditioning coaches are planning the pre-training gym stuff in combination with the warm-up, in combination with individual work for some players. The physiotherapists and the medical doctors plan the preparation for training and for the gym, who is doing what before. So, and communicating about this kind of things. I think this makes more sense. And I'm even not sure if we really need in the big team daily meetings.
Yeah, and those meetings after a session completely make sense because, like you said, in the morning everything is fine, but after a session we should see what happened after it, and then we can make some decisions for the next day or I don't know, next morning or something like this. So yeah, I like the organization. I like how you structure it, and especially micro groups depending on the roles and what you need to discuss. And well, let's say that we now organize our communication, we organize our daily work according to those meetings, and now we are coming and starting our, let's say, preseason. And this is our next topic, and I would like to talk with you about uh, testing and programming when it comes to preseason. And you mentioned that early in your beginnings, you worked in a diagnostic center, you do a lot of testing. And what's your approach when it comes to preseason testing? And what kind of, let's say, the second question is, do you prioritize some tests even more, or it depends on the case?
Yes, I think we should make a difference or should differentiate between, let's say, clear performance diagnostics, which have to be done. And if they are done, they should be done regularly. That's clear for me. So, I mean, if I go back 20 years, 15 years, then it was clear. You do, for example, I'm talking mainly about Germany, that you do 3 to 4 endurance tests a season. I mean, endurance aerobic capacity is one very, very important basis of football. We shouldn't discuss about that, even if, let's say, the high-speed focus is a little bit more the modern approach, but it's not a black or white. It's both. That's totally clear. And everybody who ignores aerobic capacity will do mistakes over time. That's also clear for me. So I think that in modern football, while to be honest, especially in the elite setting, all is orientated, let's say, towards tactical periodization, being very, very specific, but sometimes forgetting the basics. So I'm still convinced that regular endurance testing, if it's with graded field tests or different tests, could be laboratory tests on maximal oxygen uptake, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. It needs to be only integrated in a concept, in a philosophy. But doing that regularly is very important. So I learned a lot about our own training philosophy by regular testing during a season. Because let's say, what could we do else? Okay, we could interpret our GPS data from the games and saying this is our performance diagnostics. Because if my team is running a lot, they seem to be fit. We know that this is a little bit too simple because we don't know the biological effort behind the data. So that's the main reason why I am a big proponent of doing regular performance diagnostics. And I think that should include, especially in preseason, having an idea about endurance and especially about power. I don't think I wouldn't do at the beginning of the preseason a speed test because speed is not the main thing at the beginning of it. It's important, but not at that time point.
Not at that time, yeah.
So if we do it as a separate test, or if we do it by using our GPS or camera data and having only the values, it doesn't matter. But in the moment when we do regular sprint training and we try to make our players better in terms of being able to cope with that type of load, why shouldn't we do a maximum speed test, 30 meter, 40 meter sprint test, whatever? So nowadays people are a little bit afraid of this kind of testing because players don't like and so on. I think we have to be strong towards players because we try to make them better. So that's a very important part. But I think always I have in performance diagnostics, I have always the very, very simple philosophy. We test when we don't know the result. So if we know that players are not too good because they didn't train for speed for 6 or 8 weeks, why should we test speed? that doesn't make too much sense. And the endurance setting is a little bit different because we give plans to them for off-season that they work on that capacity, and then it's not clear how they react to that. No? So what we also don't know, we don't know exactly how the single player responds to the preseason. So having at the end of the preseason, I would always recommend after second or third game, if there is, let's say, full match fitness, to make the next test. And obviously you have to integrate it in your weekly periodization, and you have to consider that there's some fatigue from that, but this should be not a problem in a high performance setting. The other thing is, let's say, all the preseason screening, let's say a little bit more the preventive stuff, if we call it like this. This is a little bit overemphasized for me because I don't believe too much in baseline testing, because individual players are so different, and it's more for me about working over the whole year and doing testing for them when it's important. Let's say a player is coming with stiff hip flexor and doesn't perform very well in the range of motion testing. And in 2 weeks, it might be completely different if you work regularly on that. So this is not the baseline. Also, I don't believe too much in that we need baseline data for having a clear goal for rehabilitation, because rehabilitation goals are so different because you don't know the result 100% before. There's some type of self-organization rehab. So to sum up, I think the importance of performance diagnostics is important, and it should not be ignored. And it should be even emphasized a little bit more than it's done actually. And the typical preseason screening regarding prevention, we shouldn't overemphasize. I always would say, why ticking boxes if it doesn't help too much? It must be, at least in elite setting, it must be a very, very individual way of developing corrective exercises, doing prevention and so on. And the question when I test depends on where I am in that individual plan.
Where you are with the individual plan, but also where this athlete or this player is and what kind of information you want to take from him, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And I just wanted to, well, you already emphasize it, and this is so good that you tell it, because I think that regular endurance testing is something that we should definitely do. And I like the approach that you mentioned, that in a professional setting, you've been doing that for 3 to 4 times a year, and sometimes even more depending on the schedule, right?
Yeah.
Just to be sure. Yeah, that's so good, because I know that a lot of clubs or organizations sometimes just do on a preseason baseline endurance testing, and this is it. After that, maybe sometimes they do the second one, but it's most like 1 or 2 testing sessions regarding the endurance. But like you said, after that 2 or 3 weeks, 4 weeks of training sessions and games, these results will change. So we need to see, are we heading in a good direction or not? So regular endurance testing should give us this information. Are we ready for match fitness?
And it gives you a clear feedback on how you managed your players. Let's consider you did the test in the preseason, or probably 2, and you do it again in January. And you know a lot about your game management and about your training management. So because it could be that some players who started with a big endurance deficit, for example, after European Championships or World Championships, because they didn't play too much. And then it's so interesting to see in the January, did they recover to their normal values with only playing, which happens very often, but it needs that they need to be managed on a very individual basis, especially at the beginning of the season, if they are weak regarding load capacity and endurance. I'm not talking about that if we do regular endurance testing, that we have to do a lot of individual endurance training. It's not about that. It's more about we see if our training process and our load management process leads to what we want to have. That means at the end having the best possible aerobic capacity.
And I will get back to aerobic capacity and endurance testing, well, programming also, but I will skip to the other specter. You mentioned power testing also, that this is something that is important to you. And regarding the power, so what are the test procedures that you are using? Is it the standard counter movement jump, squat jump, hop test, or is it really a power testing on a dynamos or something like this? So
yeah, if I'm talking about power testing, I'm primarily mean the jump testing. And obviously, the basic thing is the counter movement jump, but not simply analyzing jumping height. It's more about having the force time relation and ideally having left-right difference, independent if you do single leg or a double leg testing. So that's one thing I liked. I think one of the most important aspects is to have a short contact time in jumping, especially in the drop jumps, and being able to develop a lot of force in that short time frame. So from that point of view, to assess that, I think it's very important, while knowing that this test is not too common for football players. If you do that with track and field athletes, they do a drop jump if they sleep 100% correct. For football players, if they don't train that regularly, it's much more difficult. But on the other hand, the information from counter movement jump is limited. And if we strive for efficient movement patterns, then I think there's a big correlation between short contact times in a drop jump while developing enough force and how you behave and how you behave in sprinting. There's a clear correlation between these parameters. And so that's why I feel it's very important to assess that basic capacity. So counter movement jump and drop jump, I would say, but with force time curve analysis is the main thing we should look on.
Yeah, it's not just what is how high they jump. It's what is happening, under the hood, and the efficiency, like you said, with the jump, ground contact time, flight time. And you mentioned that endurance testing you are doing a few times a year, depending what you need. But when it comes to counter movement and drop jump and power values, do you use the same methodology or principle, like every 4th or 6th week, or you think that maybe sometimes I will just use those two athletes in 2 weeks, I will test them, then after 3 weeks I will test someone else? Or when it comes to power, do you follow the same philosophy?
Yeah, it would be a little bit similar to what I said on prevention and the preventive screening. That on the one hand, we probably have some general philosophy, but on the other hand, it must be very individual. So I would say in general, if we talk about performance diagnostics, it's important to assess it regularly, but with a plan. And this means that we shouldn't combine, let's say, performance diagnostics with monitoring, because monitoring means that we are talking about fatigue monitoring. And if I want to assess if, let's say, a training block of 6 to 8 weeks led finally to improve in jumping height or the other parameters from force time curve, then we should do it in a very fresh state. So I think it's sometimes a little bit difficult to make a difference between monitoring and real performance testing. So I wouldn't prefer to do each week jump testing, or better each day, like a lot of people are doing nowadays, because they think they can exactly see how good players are on that given day. I don't think that's realistic. It's a nice idea. It's a nice plan, but I don't think it works perfectly. It's more you do something, and it's better than doing nothing and having no idea. But I clearly prefer to do performance diagnostics when it's important, because imagine you do each week jump testing. I know a lot of colleagues are doing that. And how do you guarantee that players working 100%
on that test?
Yes. Yeah. And it's not 95, 93. So, I mean, that's not that objective as we sometimes think it is, because it depends on your effort. It depends on your motivation. And that at least is a confusing factor. We shouldn't ignore completely.
Yeah, and it's something that is just, like you said, it's one piece of the whole equation, the training session that you planned, GPS data behind it, heart rate responses, then it comes back to power values. So everything is like connected. Maybe the answer sometimes is when we are combining all of those things, just looking on a one parameter by itself, maybe it's, like you said, maybe more biased than really gives us an information. But yeah, it's hard to connect all of those kind of dots. But it's a topic for one more podcast that we can use.
Yes.
But I will go to, let's say, this topic is a topic of testing and the logic of testing. Do you think that in future that testing procedures maybe will be more incorporated into individual profiles of the athlete? Let's say at the beginning of the preseason, you mentioned that okay, we need a baseline of everyone, but later during the preseason or in season, maybe some players need more one test than the other one. Like you said, with this guy, we will work more maybe on speed. I need to test him maybe more on speed variations more regularly, or is it testing going in that direction, maybe like individualized testing procedures, or is it something that can happen?
I strongly believe in individualized patterns, 100%. And I think if you ask me about the future, so if we as strength and conditioning coaches are doing the right things, we know everything about our athletes, because even if they're in off season and we don't see them regularly, we can organize everything. I mean, think of an elite club setting where you have 5 or 6 strength and conditioning coaches and you have a squad of 25 to 28 players. You're responsible, one coach for 5 or 6 players. It's so easy, even if you need some weeks of holidays, to be in contact with them, to have for some, let's say, important exercises, video sessions. Who organize if you don't do it on yourself, which could be done easily from fitness coaches in clubs, also travel in the off season for 2 or 3 days to players and see how they are. Simply see how they move in their basic exercises to have an impression about them. So the one thing is that we could solve a lot of things with videos, but I think the future will be also that each player has its own sensor. So, for example, simple loading sensors where you see a right-left behavior in a squat. So, meaning before showing up to the first day of preseason, you already know about movement quality, about right-left loading, and so on, because the players are equipped with everything we have. I think this must be the future, and I think sensors will be even cheaper in the future, and we can use that on an individualized basis. I mean, it goes then in the direction to that I think in the future we will have a 3-dimensional analysis of each simple movement from training and from game.
Training,
and so this
game,
will tell us a lot, I'm sure. So I think that means that we can assess risk behavior or risk profiles, for example, for leg axis. Does a player have a change of direction? Some biomechanical deficits regarding valgus position, femoral internal rotation, how is the trunk position, and so on. Is a risk pattern or not? And we have that in the very, very specific situation, so we don't need to test that in the preseason in some way by
You're just taking.
You just take what you have. And I think with more data we have, with better data algorithms we have, and machine learning will help us a lot. I think this will be the future if we think what will happen in 5 to 10 years.
Because now a lot of research is coming in the direction that we are pulling movements from the games, and these are the testing movements and scenarios that we get information from them. And like you said, I think this will be definitely also in the future that we will get information from the games with 3D analysis and movement analysis, and we could prepare, like you said, better preseason, off-season programs before players are even coming to the club setting. And we are testing something right now. Maybe it could be interesting. I can show you what we found. We took some bunch of data I think we have 4 years of data. We took 1 year of the data, and we found some students from University of Notre Dame that did an amazing job. They are data science students, and they have an amazing, computers there with the machine learning algorithms and everything. And they found some agility efficiency things and how the player is changing. So they were analyzing every possible movement, just one change of direction, one to the left, one to the right.
Yes.
And they show me some new variables like change of angular speed, angular acceleration, and those kind of things. And it's quite interesting. So I will show you this later. But to get back to our questions, and now we finished the preseason, we get the results, and now I would like to talk with you about strength training more. I know that this is also some of the topics that you like and that you do a lot. And when it comes to strength training, how do you organize and what's your way of looking at it? How to organize the strength training and in a club setting, and but also we can touch a little bit more. I know that you worked in national team setting, so maybe we can see how you manage to do strength in a team setting and when you don't have players so often, like in a national team setting. So
In general, for me, it's very clear, at least in the elite setting where we have enough manpower, that strength training is like prevention, a very individual thing, because not each player is the same. So we can't ignore that. I mean, I don't have to talk about different heights, different body weight, different muscle mass, and so on. I mean, I saw so many players who looked like they are daily in the gym and they didn't do at all in their life before. So on the other hand, you have others who love it and who do it each day, and you don't see too much. So I mean, it's very important. And since we have to be well informed about our players, I also don't believe in that each exercise is as good for one individual as for the other individual. I mean, that's why I would say being well informed about the players means we have to consider the basic posture. I mean, and this is about lumbopelvic rhythm, with it the very basis of the start of how I see a player. And it's so different if you have a player with a flat lumbar spine compared to a hyperlordosis lumbar spine, even regarding using deadlifts, squats, and so on. If you do it two-leg squats, if you do a single leg, then you have the problem of standing and kicking leg with some pelvic obliquity and so on. So, and that's all the basis of how I see strength training. So I don't believe too much in general programs. I believe in individual solutions. And this has also something to do with the kind of mobility players have. So if we think about prevention or strength training has to be orientated towards eccentric training for hamstrings, for example, I would say there has to be a difference between a hypermobile and a hypomobile athlete, because a hypermobile athlete with a lot of mobility in his joints typically needs a little bit more inner range work than outer range work. And but most players, of course, need outer range work like eccentric under lengthening conditions. But this also has to be in some way individually organized. So that's how I see it. And obviously, if we talk then about how do we transfer that information between club and national teams, then obviously national teams nowadays are those guys who have to do what the clubs are telling them, because we are in the club settings on a very, very high level, independent of philosophy. And if you see it like me, you have to do it on a individual basis, or you have to do it generally the same for the team. Anyway, you have a clear idea what you want to have. And if you send players as a club to the national team, and obviously national team coaches and strength and conditioning coaches know that also, what you want to avoid is loading spikes or changing what you are used to do. So that's why it's clear that the national teams can't have too much impact on that. Apart from that, they are also very, very good colleagues who know players very well, and let's say see them for a few days and see probably some development we didn't detect in the club, give some important information, some important impact, meaning simply working together. And I think this always is a big opportunity, because we have players who trust their national team staff much, and let's use that. Now, World Cup is coming, then obviously if you have a few weeks of preparation, it might be different, because if strength and conditioning coaches and national team have them for, let's say, 4 to 6 weeks, then obviously you can work or see it a little bit differently.
And when it comes to, I know that there is definitely a difference between, like you said, national team and club setting, but I like what you said regarding helping each other. They can see something that maybe we don't see because we are in a daily work with them. But then the communication is again important here. But I will go more to one like straightforward, let's say, question regarding strength. It's about the frequency. And we can see now a lot of research about microdosing, small doses, small amounts every day. So what's your approach when it comes to frequency or strength training? Is it one time a week, like for the whole team, obligatory, or you have some other approach?
What I would try to do, let's talk about a club who doesn't play 3 games a week, who simply plays once a weekend.
That's a good example.
And then try to have 2 strength training sessions a week per player, but it doesn't work always. So I don't think that the solution, of course, the reasons for doing some type of microdosing this or using minimum dose, this makes a lot of sense. But finally, we should talk about, okay, how much volume with a given intensity we need for our strength adaptations, and we have to differentiate between maximum strength, between hypertrophy, between some architectural adaptations like fascicle lengths, how important they are. I'm not 100% sure if it's that clear that we all think that it is, because it's a difficult parameter. But anyway, I think it's to talk about that, and then we have to see it together. I always would say we have to do a total load management. So meaning we can't separate the gym contents from the pitch contents. And obviously, I mean, there's one reason for microdosing, because we all have the problem. If we don't do strength training for 2 weeks and we do it again, there is some risk of soreness and DOMS and so on, and we want to avoid that. But on the other hand, a well-planned structure, shouldn't create too much problems regarding this. So I would say 2 times a week, but as I said, it has to be individual. And if it's the +1 day, so if it's the -3, the -4, the -5, I would regulate it very individually again, how to distribute the 2 sessions. And it could be that finally it's 1.5, but at least I would like to have 1 normal session, which means it should consist of 2 or 3 sets per exercise. For if it's 4, if it's 5, if it's 6 exercise, it depends. But I always prefer to do strength training after football training. And not
after
before
football training. Okay.
Yeah. So and ideally with a few hours of rest.
Okay, so in a separate part when the football is, but also you would like to do it after a session. That's interesting, because you don't want to sacrifice football, right? Well, you know that you can work more. Let's say like this.
Yeah, I mean, we always have to consider. I talk obviously like you a lot to colleagues, and everybody tells me, we have no problem if you do strength training after football or before football, it works. Okay, but tell me, what do you think? Do you simply create a load tolerance? Or is it really that you think that the players adapt regarding strength parameters like you want? And we should make a difference between these two. So from that point of view, if we only have to look on concurrent training research, then it's totally clear that we have to separate those sessions. And probably there would be no arguments against saying do it strength training in the morning and doing football training in the afternoon with 4 or 5 hours in between. But anyway, my philosophy was always first the sports discipline and then the fitness, strength and conditioning around it. And I mean, this tells you rehab experience, because rehab is so individual. You don't have concurrent training problems, and you know exactly
everything.
So if you do a strength training directly after on pitch session in rehab, there's good arguments saying probably if you do it for the same muscle groups, there's no additional elevation of creatine kinase. Yes, might be, but there's information that the soreness on the next 2 days is anyway higher for those who did it directly after compared to with a few hours of rest.
Both.
So the CK is a little bit misleading because it looks like
example.
There's evidence base for doing it like this, but at the end, it's all about having the right individual load recovery relation or ratio to find always that. And that's why I think it must be very individual. Regarding strength training, if you're honest, we are working with players, and some players like, some don't like. And if the emotions around strength training in some players are always negative, the adaptation will not come like we want. So we have to find solutions. So, and I do it sometimes in rehab, that even going sometimes, we're talking about elite setting now again, going to players at home and do in a quiet atmosphere in the evening a strength session. Why not? So who says that we always have to do it at the training center? If the quiet atmosphere of a player at home, you do something individual for him, probably a guy who doesn't like strength training too much, and you create so much positive atmosphere around that. And I mean, in individual sports, there's no problem. You always do things like this.
yeah, that's it. And they need to like it, not just to do it because you told them to do. They need to believe also in that strength training, like you said. And I like the example that you connect rehab because in rehab you are periodizing and programming everything by yourself with the athlete. Well, of course, with the physios and everyone else, but you play a lot with concurrent training methodologies. When you will do because
That's your
in
daily job,
rehab,
right?
yeah, and in rehab, I like to say for a rehab specialist that this is, well, I will not, maybe one of the complex, regarding the knowledge and everything, one of the complex positions in a club setting because you need to know physiology, anatomy, monitoring, strength testing, periodization, football. You need to be good with the ball because you need to rehab that guy. And now imagine you need to program 1 week of loading, and let's say in match day -4, you need to simulate 8 kilometers with the ball. How you will do it? Because this is something that he will be doing next week or after, or weeks after that. To be creative, but also you need to know a lot of things. Where to simulate this change of direction, how to simulate that load, how to develop, when to put strength. So it's a quite complex position for me, but I like it very much. It's so interesting.
Yeah, let me say one word. I 100% agree. That's what I said you also before. So as a rehab coach, you have such a big impact on players. That's one thing. We're
Yeah,
talking always about the big importance of speed in modern days. And we can't ignore our fiber type percentages of our muscles, of our important muscles. So going back to strength training, what I always consider is how much impact or how much fatigue do I create in on-pitch sessions for different muscles. Now, there is always a risk if I create too much fatigue that my muscle fiber percentage is going towards a little bit slower, knowing that the fiber percentage is not everything, but that's at least clear that this trend will come, or this adaptation will come. So from that point of view, we have to manage fatigue. So if we create more fatigue by doing now strength training for the same muscles, it might create some load tolerance, some tissue capacity, but on the fiber type level, it might be a negative adaptation. And I would say I am one of those guys who is brave doing sometimes also no strength training if I consider that at the end speed will show some negative development due to the fatigue or the total load management problem
of the
I create
exercise.
with
Yeah,
doing all these kind of things. And it's a concurrent training problem, simply.
yeah,
And
yeah.
if we
It's
look
like,
on modern research on concurrent training, then the main thing for me is that the biggest risk is that your explosive strength is getting bad if you don't work properly with the concurrent training
exactly.
stimuli. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, because that's why maybe sometimes it's good to use blocks. Now in this period, we want to emphasize explosivity and speed, and this is where we focus 80% of
Yes.
our work.
Yeah.
Like in polarized methods, we will go with this, and we will decrease the strength a little bit because we now need velocity. And yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, I agree. I
Totally
agree
agree.
with
Yeah.
you. And to get back to strength, and I know it's maybe not so, how do you say it? Well, it's easy question to answer on, but it's but I will go with it. It's like when it comes to a weekly setting and you have your exercises, are there any exercises that you want to do every week, like must do exercises? There was a thing that a lot of research are going about Nordic hamstring exercise, single leg bridges, or flywheel training. Everybody are mentioning, hey, you need to do this 1 time a week to be safe. Hey, you need to do this 1 time or 2 times a week to keep the hamstring safe. So, do you have any of those kind of exercises, or
I don't have them, no.
yeah,
Because
okay,
at the end, like I told you before, my opinion is it must be a very individual solution, and not everybody needs the same exercises. That's one
hmm
thing.
hmm
Yeah, so I,
I
for me, for example, Nordic hamstring is a critical exercises. While it has a lot of positive effects, there could be, for example, that knee mechanics are not fine for one athlete for Nordic hamstring due to having a very you could see it because
large.
you're on your knees as a, let's say, semi-functional exercise from the joint behavior. And so that's something I try to consider when applying strength exercises. I like if you would tell me, okay, but now you have to decide which is the best hamstring exercise. Then I would
Yeah,
prefer a single leg bridge capacity compared to Nordic hamstring exercise.
more. Okay,
If I
okay. I
have to
think I
make a choice.
yeah, yeah, make a choice. Yeah, yeah. But it's not like it's hard to say those choices. I asked that question because of that, because I need now it's not easy just to say you need to do these 4 sets and that's it. But it depends, like you said, on the player joints, leverages. Is it a big leverage, small leverage when it comes to Nordic and those kind of things? And maybe,
Going
yeah,
one step further, if I should make again a choice on that, and you tell me, okay, what do you think might be the best exercise for football player? Then I simply would say loaded step ups. But in terms of a power exercise, like you're working
propulsion and yeah,
with 30 to 40 kilos of extra load, depending on your body weight and so on, and you do an explosive step up with, let's say, a reciprocal position of hip extension, hip flexion between your two legs. This stimulates also some type of late swing phase. So I think it's one of the most complex exercises. And I'm always asking myself, okay, what can we do what is not already done on the field? And this is one big example for me. Because it's explosive and it's
easy
so
to set up,
multifunctional, multi-joint. It's more or less it's extensor chain, it's flexor chain, everything is integrated.
It simulates, like you said, it simulates the knee drive, it simulates the kick down on the floor. So it's a good acceleration, but also high velocity exercise, I would say. Yeah. And let's combine now two topics. Let's go. We are coming to the end of strength training and coming more to the monitoring side of the story. And you mentioned that your strength training is connected with football drills, so what you're doing that day on a football drill, but also regarding what kind of numbers, like you said, we collected, let's say with small static games, we collected change of directions, acceleration, deceleration work, and now we will do less or more strength work or something like this. So are you combining your strength work with football drills, and how you incorporate monitoring here in that story?
Yeah, so look, the monitoring data, especially the on-pitch data, have a big impact on what I'm finally planning on an individual basis. So give you a simple example. Let's say, same example, I want to go for hamstring strength exercises on a given day. It could be the -3, but it could be also the +1. And in the -3 situation, let's say we had on that given day before a lot of high-speed meters. How much I do with a given player depends on how much high-speed meters he created in the on-pitch session. So the question is always, is he within the normal range? Is he lower? Which is a good basis for doing a normal strength session, a normal strength workout on that given day. But is he much higher? So was there a spike in high-speed meters? Then it's probably not the best idea,
not a good idea
to do now another strength session. And the same holds true for the +1. So I consider the game data. And I know that already after the game, the day before, if a player has a big spike, like 20% more than normal, then this is a clear sign for me doing no hamstring work on the next day.
And what do you think that can we use also that data? And this is a good example, after a session, you see the live data. Okay, this is what he did. He can do more or less hamstrings work.
Yeah.
But also, if he did more work, maybe we can plan better recovery strategies for that body part.
Yeah, of course, 100%.
Yeah. So we can plan better warm-ups, but also we can plan extra strength work, but also we can do more directed recovery work. Yeah, I like
it. If we take that example and let's say something like that happens on the +3, okay, then it's a multifaceted thing. So on the one hand, let's say one player had a big spike in high-speed meters. Okay, decision, no additional strength training. Having more recovery, having direct contact with the nutritionist, who has to know that data, because it's clear with that data that the player needs a little bit more recovery than normal. And the next consequence for the next day is using that player as a focus player for specific checks in the morning, for hamstring or pelvic, lumbar spine stiffness, for example. But doing some, let's say, extra warm-up for him on an individual basis, which is not for giving more warm-up to the hamstring, but a little bit more around it. So like pelvic, lumbar spine, not mobility, let's say thoracic spine. So expecting that there might be some heightened tone in that muscle and doing all that this tone is regulated before starting the training session. It could be that that there's no reaction, but there's some probability that this reaction will come.
And this is when it comes to monitoring. Let's say just yesterday I had one talk with one friend of mine, and we are talking like a lot for the last 8 years regarding strength conditioning questions. So we're talking about monitoring, and this is something that you said right now. It's not about predicting this will happen on, I don't know, 15th of May, but it's about checking the things that you said, and we will do it like this. Will something happen in the future? We don't know, but if we don't do it, maybe it will, but maybe it will not. But this is still a better option to do it than to skip it, right?
And it's not only about avoiding injuries. It's also it's simply about
training,
optimizing
recovery.
performance.
That's
giving the player the best chance to perform on the next day on the highest level he can do.
That's it. To recover better, to activate better, to perform better, and this is the story of the monitoring. And well, let's say your philosophy regarding the monitoring. Some of them are saying that GPS is the best option. Some of them are saying heart rate is the best option. RPEs. What's your philosophy regarding gathering data and making sense of it?
Yeah, I think what of course, all the, let's say, external data are very important because they tell us simply what we did. If it's GPS data, if it's from strength training, if you use a velocity-based approach or a load-based approach, whatever you do, we need to have that information. But more important is to assess how the player reacts. Does he adapt or how does he recover? It must be orientated on the internal load or on some, let's say, parameters who indicate a little bit what happened in the body. And obviously that's why I like, with all the limitation, it has heart rate. It's clear that this is a very, very basic consideration, knowing that heart rate you can't use for all, let's say, exercise forms. If you play 1 against 1 or 2 against 2, these are very short, high intensity drills. Heart rate doesn't increase very much, so it doesn't help you too much. But at least if you go for, let's say, high intensity aerobic drills, and you need to know how much minutes are you above 90% of maximum heart rate, how long are you below that, and obviously there's some individual adjustments you have to make because not everybody is going regularly over 90%, but it's very important. And the other thing is to include, again, the communication, and in this case with the players, because my philosophy was always players should move efficiently on the pitch. Doesn't matter on which day, and they can give you a really, really good feedback. So meaning if players know that the information they give you is accepted
useful,
and is used in the way that it helps them, they will be very honest to you. I'm talking about that because we all know the well-being questionnaires in the morning, but players like it or don't like it. Sometimes they test the stuff if they give, let's say, a very fatigue number, if the stuff reacts on that, and very often they don't do, and then players say, okay, whatever I give them as information has no consequence. No? So we have to clearly show our players whatever will be the solution, that their information is important. And that's like in rehab. In rehab, you have no problem. The players tell you everything because in that moment they know it's only for them. But as soon as they're in the team setting, they behave differently.
And regarding the external load, we need some information here. And you said that players need to know why we are doing that, and so that we are using that data in daily decisions and work. And I think that the most questions here that I get from coaches, mostly also talking with football coaches on our academy, when we are teaching coaches for the football licensing and so on, and we discuss about the methods of monitoring, and RP and questionnaires is something that we discuss a lot, because here a lot of clubs, first division seniors now, yes, maybe some on the 19 team have GPS. Heart rate, I think that a lot of clubs just moved heart rate methodology, from their work. I don't know why, because something just happened, but we need to get it back quite fast. But we discuss a lot about RPs and wellness questionnaires. And what do you think about those? Can they be beneficial if we educate the player what we are doing with that, or are you using those kind of methods in your clubs?
To be honest, because that has something to do with my origin. I'm a guy of performance diagnostics. I am a guy who strongly believes in internal data. So meaning it's not hard, it's also about using blood data, for example. And it's all about having information about the player, which is independent of opinion or beliefs or motivation of player. Obviously, their feedback, like I said, is also very important regarding how, if a player comes back from a session, and you did like in the example before, yeah? We expected due to high speed meters the day before he was fatigued. And then we do specific recovery, do specific warm up individually for him in the gym. And he comes out of the session and says, I moved freely, I moved without tension. It felt really great. I think it was a good way, even if you don't know in that moment how he will be on the next day, because you have to wait for that reaction, obviously. This was a targeted thing at the end. So meaning that kind of information is important. But on the other hand, if you see then the day later or 2 days later that there was no, let's say, extra reaction in creatine kinase, for example, then whatever was the reason for that, it seemed to go in the right direction. So meaning finding parameters who gives you an objective information if what you feel due to communication or what you see on the pitch has some substance or not. This is simply scientific thinking, because I always try to explain myself at the beginning of a thought or hypothesis why I'm not wrong. So like we should do as good scientists, explaining ourselves why we are wrong with what we are assuming. And that always helps. No?
And it's not bad to do it on a regular basis, because like this, we are also growing, but also understanding better the method that we are using and filtering what is good information or not. But if you are in a surrounding where you don't have, like blood markers and heart rate data and so on, will you focus on just doing, well, definitely doing good things like strength training, good periodization, endurance training, and so on. But will you then decide to use, hey, we need some kind of a tool to check the responses? Will you then go to RP and wellness questionnaires, or you will still try to find some other way how to do it?
I would say in a low money setting, let's use the training load in terms of session RPE. Together with training time, because with a little bit of education, I strongly believe in that this could have a big impact. And the other thing is simply observe your players during training. See, so this is, if I go back to rehab session, the most important part of decision making is observe players and see when they are getting fatigued, if they start to doing technical errors. And that's, for example, in a rehab sitting, in not in all team settings, you can stop then the session because the time point is different in each player a little bit. But in a rehab setting, if I already said before, I don't want to create too much fatigue, then it's clear this is the end, independent of data. So, I mean, the behavior of the players, and this is always, if you plan too much for your team, and you see 75% of your players are getting fatigued earlier. We all know that from, let's say, doing small-sided games. And the coaches like to go on. And you, as a strength and conditioning, you observe them, you see they're doing so many mistakes. Now it's getting really dangerous. Probably not for that given day, but for the next days, if you go on now.
Day, yeah.
So, and I think I strongly believe in our observational skills, that we have to keep them, to maintain them, to develop them, and simply to see how our players behave. This is a big part of load management, finally, or of monitoring, let's say. But it's
definitely,
of course, it's subjective. But at the end, each starting 11 on a Saturday is subjective by the head coach. This is not science.
Yeah, they are making that decision according to everything that they saw, and so this is a very good advice. So tracking your players, how they are moving on a session. And would you say that then your criteria when it comes to, let's say, playing small-sided games, medium-sided games, large-sided games, any kind of setting, that your threshold or something that is like, hey, maybe we should stop right now, is that when the quality of football actions, density of football actions are dropping down, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, super. And Andreas, I don't know about you, but this is going quite fast, but it's so interesting for me. and we have still just one question, and it goes to, I will go now more, we talked about rehab, and I would like to go more into the rehab part. I had something different on a side, but I would like to go on a rehab setting. And we didn't talk much about endurance, and you said that endurance is important, but a lot of questions that I ask myself in when I was also responsible for the rehab part, building the whole rehab procedure and return to sports sector, because the club didn't have it, and we needed to establish everything from the beginning. Procedures, testing, injuries, when do we train, how do we train, communication. So basically all of it. And that's why I found it so interesting. But I always ask myself, regarding endurance and what kind of endurance I need to build in a weekly setting, one to one, And I had some idea, like on first day of a week, I will have defensive movements, aerobic capacity, acceleration, something. Next day, more velocities, offensive movements, sprinting, crossing, something. And then on a C day, let's say Wednesday, was recovery, soft tissue work, and those kind of things. What's your approach when it comes, building endurance and volume on a rehab player who is coming back after an injury? I know that this is not an easy task, especially when you need to cover 25 or 30 kilometers sometimes, or do you even cover something like this?
So let me say regarding the endurance aerobic capacity problem. For me, rehab is, in the best case, a really simple thing. First of all, do we need to, if we want to maintain or improve aerobic capacity, what about the first days after injury? Doing a lot of aerobic work on ergometers for non-injured regions, whatever you create. You do a rowing exercise. You go, if you have, it could be some type of bicycle and so on. This first days are totally unimportant regarding aerobic capacity, because you don't lose in the first days. At least if we talk not about the ACL rehab, we're talking about muscle fiber strain, or we're talking about ankle sprain, and we're talking about 3 to 4 weeks of rehab. So if you do aerobic exercise the first 5 to 7 days or not, doesn't make any difference, because you don't lose too much. Only thing you're losing is your enzyme capacity, but you can't train for that due to intensity you need for that. So that's the first thing. So it's not important. There are reasons for doing it, like hormonal system, like keep the system alive and so on, but not for having later on a good aerobic capacity on the pitch. But what is then much more important is in the mid stage, that you create the highest possible aerobic load you can create, because that depends on the end, or it determines how your chronic load capacity, but also your adaptation. So I have a big focus in mid stage on specific aerobic development or maintenance, let's say, and it's very variable. It could be with simple continuous runs, depending on the player, is he used to that or not. It could be very early, very intermittent type sessions, could be also, depending on the injury, very multi-directional sessions very early. But very important thing is that I try to create a relatively high volume from beginning on, and keep that volume. So even if I go towards late stage, I keep training volume high, in terms of that even on high intensity days, there must be, let's say, 25 to 30 minutes of a long warm-up, and big part of this warm-up is aerobic capacity work. And it simply prepares you for the high intensity parts of the session later on. So meaning mid stage is very critical in your aerobic outcome of the whole rehab. And then you have to go on in the late stage, if you are approaching maximal intensity in all movement patterns, by not ignoring aerobic capacity, by going on with that higher volume. So meaning, if you simply simulate your team training sessions, like you want to go for 60 to 70% of total volume, then you end up very often in 4 and 5K sessions and so on. So I end up very often in 6.5K sessions, but not because I want to simulate team training, because it's the result of the build-up, the progressions regarding combination of volume and intensity. And it also includes having, I would do, from an aerobic perspective, maximally, or not maximally, but ideally 2 high aerobic intensity intervals in a week. So, but there's nothing open
sessions.
then. Yeah. So, but there are 2 or 3 more sessions. I like to use the Banksville approach, like saying we are talking about aerobic high, aerobic moderate, aerobic low. So I would place 2 aerobic high sessions a week, 2 aerobic moderate, and probably 1
Moderate.
aerobic low. From
Yeah.
this, but this is not. I'm not talking about endurance running. I'm talking about the main emphasis of the single sessions. And it could be on a given day that it's aerobic moderate, but it could be with some type of sprinting. So meaning there's some type of anaerobic focus, but
Yeah, you cannot exclude that.
it doesn't interfere with the aerobic part. No?
Yeah, you cannot exclude like acceleration, deceleration, or some sprinting because you're working aerobic moderate work, right? Because he will be doing those actions also in the games or the next week. And what do you think about the, let's say, approach? And I also try to use those like 3 colors, like a green, orange, red, like easy running, medium running, hard running. And I don't know, first day, orange, medium, hard, low, medium, hard, low. So I have like 2 hard sessions, 2 medium sessions to cover volume. Here I cover intensity, and then 2 green soft sessions like capillarization, zone 2, soft tissue work, something like this, and Sunday off. This was like a periodization, in a RTS cycle, something like this.
I use that color system also, but I use it less for planning because I know what I want to plan. I use it for first observation within seconds to see what happened. Because let's say I want to go through the last 2 weeks of rehab for planning the next week. So and for example, I have only 1 high intensity session, meaning 1 rep each week, due to some muscle reaction the player had.
Okay, yeah,
that's like that's what unfortunately sometimes happens. So, and even if I know that in my head, it takes me only a few seconds to see with that color system that we missed something. So this doesn't change probably too much, but it tells me there are 2 stimuli we're missing. This tells me that the adaptation was not that good that I hoped we can have. And it means that also the chronic load regarding high intensity aerobic capacity is not that high that we hope. So the consequence is only being careful and observe what happens, but knowing that it was at least not the best solution. That's because we have to make so many decisions on a given day. So that's things I try to use to avoid mistakes and to make simply good decisions. Huh?
And as much as possible. Yeah, I think that someone studied even that, how many decisions strength conditioning coach need to do on a training session, like 25 or 30, something like this, maybe in some occasions even more. But imagine on one lecture that I was giving, I was trying to calculate, how we were talking with the coaches and we planned things and we trying to see, okay, these are your 10 decisions that you need to do on a match day -4. Then next day, 10 decisions on match day -3, and so on. So after a 4-day cycle, you had like 40 decisions. And we noticed that, well, it doesn't mean that those decisions are right or wrong, but let's say on some kind of a calculation, we calculate that first day was like 40% wrong, second day 30% wrong.
Yeah.
But maybe we could do better, like better warm-ups, better strength training, better compensation session. We miss this, then we miss that, and at the end of the week we can have like 40% of total decisions that we made are like went in some other directions, but they're not so complex. They were quite simple, but yeah, it could be done. It could happen. Definitely rehab. Imagine not communicating, like you said, that this player is ready. Is he ready for big games, or maybe he's still ready for just like a small side games and warm-ups with the team?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's not the same. And well, Andreas, thank you so much for this episode and for all the questions and answer that you provided. Like you mentioned in the beginning, with a lot of with this experience that you had, you provide so good examples that everybody who will be listening to this will definitely enjoy and could take something, from that practice. I definitely wrote some things down and I will check them a little bit more. And yeah, we are coming to the end of this episode. And for the last thing, can you tell us maybe something about your future plans, what you've been doing, and if someone from the, I don't know, audience or listeners would like to reach out to you, is it possible to reach out on email or something? I know that you're a busy busy guy and doing a lot of lecturing and so on. But yeah, just I don't know. Maybe if someone is interested into more details like this.
Yeah, so in general, what I would like to do in the future is simply, assisting and helping other people. But to be honest, on a professional and on a business basis also. So, I mean, unfortunately, it's not possible to have contact each day with interested people. So, for example, one of the things I would like to do in the future is doing educating in terms of one-by-one approach. I'm not talking about mentoring. It's more about develop individual ways. And so I'm always open to talks on that, independent of business. But okay, that's the way I would like to go in future. So I know there are a lot of people who needs help, who want to organize themselves, who need to have a clearer structure, and I'm open for doing that.
Good to hear that, and I know that people will definitely reach out. And thank you one more time for being with us. I hope that you enjoyed.
I enjoyed it really. Thank you very much, Marco.
I hope that we will repeat this maybe, I don't know, in a few months on some different topic. I know that I will have a lot of questions and that we have a lot of topic to discuss. And for everybody else, follow our YouTube channel, follow our websites. We will have interesting webinars, workshops, but also in June we will have an conference, Sunset Conference again, that is coming with Ultrax team. So until next time, everybody, goodbye.
Goodbye.